Let's take a look at the presentation and analysis of accounts receivable and notes receivable. On the balance sheet, what would you present? You will present the notes by major categories as far as either long-term or current, because if you remember, notes receivable could be both based on when it's due. And then short-term receivables will be your current assets, right? And for both notes and accounts receivable, you could have the allowance account set up that should be subtracted. So you would list accounts receivable at gross amount less allowance for doubtful account. And then the amount that results would be called net realizable value or cash realizable value. Realizable means how much will we realize in cash. What will be on the income statement? You will show your bad debt expenses because it's an expense account on the income statement. And if there are any service charge expenses, as far as the factoring or credit card expenses, those are reported as selling expenses on the income statement. And then if you have any kind of interest revenue from a notes receivable, that's your other revenues and gains. Okay. So here's what it's going to look like. A whole bunch of receivables. You could have receivables from subsidiaries, trades, financing, restricted, etc. And see how it says less allowance and then net receivables. So that's the net realizable value I was talking about. Okay, how about analysis? So I would like for you to remember in general basic structure up here. And I apologize, the slide is kind of squished. I was trying to fix it, but every time I import it, PowerPoint gets messed up. Cisco Systems has net sales. Now, what does it mean, net sales? Net sales without what? Net stands net from something. That's without sales, returns, and allowance. So you'll take your gross sales, and if you have any returns and allowances, you will subtract those. And sales discounts to get it to be at net amount. So that's minus without these two things will give you net sales. At the end, in the beginning, accounts receivable, again, net balance. What's net up here? Without allowance. Okay, so minus allowance. The one that I just talked about, allowance for doubtful accounts, is roughly 5 million. And ending accounts receivable, again, net balance is roughly a little bit over 5 million. Assuming that Cisco sales were all on credit, what does it mean on credit? So there weren't any cash sales. That's why you could see up here it's not credit sales, because receivables will be connected to credit sales. They will not be receivable for cash sales. Now, when you calculate this ratio for a financial statement of a company, you just pulled from the somewhere online, you will not find credit sales specifically. You'll just use net sales. That's okay. How would you compute that turnover? So you'll take your net credit sales or net sales and divide it by average net receivables. Okay, so why average? So what does it mean? So the basic rule for you guys, I'm going to put it in red. If you remember, your sales are located on the income statement. And remember, your receivables are located on the balance sheet. So if you simply divide the two, income statement is for the period. In this case, it's a whole year. Balance sheet, if you just grab the ending balance, you will be dividing it by one date at the end of the year. Imagine you're a startup company, so you didn't have anything in the beginning of the year, and now you have this great sales, but your receivables are at the end of the year just one number. It doesn't really give you a good idea of what's going on in the company because the time periods are not the same. So what we're going to do, we're going to try to artificially stretch the balance sheet so it's kind of looks like the same time period as the income statement. How could we do that? Well, if we take beginning balance and if we take the ending balance and average it up, you roughly have the same time period as what you have for sales. Now, from now on, any ratio that we will be covering, if you have an income statement and a balance sheet account in the same ratio, you always have to average balance sheet numbers. Okay, let me say it again. If you have income statement and balance sheet number in the same ratio, you'll have to always average the balance sheet amount, like it is in this case. And in some ratios, you will only have balance sheet, for example, current ratio. In this case, because they're both in the same time period at the end of the year or the period, then you don't have to average them. Okay. A variation a little bit of this ratio is called average collection period in terms of days. Or also you might see the name days sales in receivables. Number of days sales in receivables. That's another name for this days average collection period. Okay, so what is that? If we take number of days in the year, 365 days, and we will divide it by accounts receivable turnover, we will come up with how many days it takes us to collect our receivables. Okay. So if you take a look at both ratios, always ask yourself, do I want the higher the better or the lower the better? As far as accounts receivable turnover, the higher your turnover, the better off you are. Okay? Why? If you think about it, if this number is higher, let's say it's 10, you're going to end up with only 36 days to collect. Again, the faster you collect, the lower the number of days you have to collect, the better off you are. So in terms of, let me draw on this, in terms of accounts receivable turnover, the higher the better. And in terms of number of days to collect, the lower the better. Okay, and here's just another quick do it, and this one is again got messed up, but you can see net credit sales again is given to you, and you will use two numbers, your net receivables without the allowance in the beginning and at the end of the year that you average. So that will be roughly 25 times for the turnover, and then takes your number of days divided by accounts receivable turnover, how many days is to collect. In this case, we end up with 15. Hey, we're rocking it. Okay, that's it for today.